Okay, thank you all for coming. Parshas Vayigash. We find it opens up with Yehuda confronting Yosef. And ultimately it's this confrontation that finally leads to the ultimate revelation of Yosef actually being Yosef. And the story continues, as we all know. But it was clear that it took a lot of courage and bravery from Yehuda to be able to do this, to be able to stand up to Yosef, who at the time they thought was second to the king, to the Paro. What gave Yehuda that strength? What made Yehuda and drove Yehuda to be able to accomplish such a feat when seemingly it was harder for all the other brothers to do it, and he was the one that was able to? Why Yehuda? So I once heard from a friend, who's probably quoting it from another place, a very nice idea, that while of course all the imahos, Rachel, Leah, Bilhah, Zilpah, they all had tremendous hakaras hatov for all the children that they had, all the shvatim that they gave birth to. And we see reasons and ideas and expressions to Hashem, beautiful expressions within all the names of all the shvatim of all the children that they had. But Yehuda is unique because the name Yehuda itself is an expression of hoda'ah, of thanks. And so perhaps we can say more intrinsically injected into Yehuda was this concept of hakaras hatov more than for the other shvatim. His whole name was the essence of hakaras hatov. What is hakaras hatov? What is gratitude? What does it mean to say thanks, thank you? A lot of times we say thanks, thank you. Nowadays most thank yous are just two letters, TY, most of the time. At least for those of you who write or type. And it's said without too much thought put into it. But when you really want to say thank you to a person, when it's something really significant, and you really feel that hakaras hatov, that thanks, what is it? It's to be modeh to that person. Modeh, to give your thanks, is the same word as modah. Modah and modeh is to give thanks, but also to admit. Which means that you're admitting to that person, I am indebted to you, you get credit for this. There's a level of admission. There's a level almost of, and sometimes it's even uncomfortable for people to say thank you or to get favors done for them. There's an admission of, you've done something. I'm acknowledging it. Hakaras hatov, recognition, recognizing the good. Not just having it happen to you and moving on. So therefore, modeh, modah, they're the same word. To be thankful for, to admit that person, to recognize that person did something good for you. It's all one and the same. And so for Yehuda, he had this koach to be able to think beyond himself, perhaps a little bit more than the average person, even a little bit more maybe than the other shvatim. To think, to admit, to recognize the reality of the situation even when it's so hard to recognize what is really at play under the surface. In fact, we find with Tamar that Yehuda said, Haker na, recognize 1 second, don't kill her. And he admitted, to his great embarrassment, that he was the one that was responsible for that child that she was pregnant with. To his great embarrassment. What gave him, again, the courage to stand up and admit, make such an admission? It's this midah of hakaras hatov, being able to be thankful, to appropriately and properly recognize goodness that someone did for you, and have the courage to be able to appropriately thank for it and admit that such things occurred, and therefore be able to recognize and admit the truth and the reality in general. That's a very important midah. I think here too we can say that Yehuda was recognizing with high intensity that the Ribbono Shalom is at play over here, as he always is, but especially here at this crucial moment in Klal Yisrael's history. All the brothers and Yaakov and everyone ultimately coming down to Mitzrayim, Yehuda recognized the Ribbono Shalom was driving everything. And it was through that recognition that he was able to recognize more than others that he knew he had to do what he had to do. He'll put in his hishtadlus, he'll do what he can, and the rest is up to the Ribbono Shel Olam. It actually requires a level of recognition, of admission, to admit, I'm not in control over here, the Ribbono Shel Olam is. And I think that's the same midah of being able to also admit thank you to someone else. They're the ones that helped you out. To admit, to recognize good that was done for you. Rabbi Friend, when he said over this Vart, he quoted the famous historical event where on August 6th, 1945, how many people know who Colonel Paul Tibbets is? Probably no one. How many people know what the little boy was? Probably no one, unless he did a report on it. And in fact, Colonel Paul Tibbets was the pilot of the B-29 Super Fortress bomber that dropped the first atomic bomb, nicknamed Little Boy, on the Japanese city of Hiroshima on August 6, 1945. By the way, the second bomb was not called Big Boy, it was called Fat Man. Go figure. The one that was dropped in Nagasaki. Anyway, so what did he name his plane? He flew a B-29 Super Fortress bomber. He dropped the first actually militarily used atomic bomb in warfare ever. Quite historic. And he's getting into his plane and he's going to write the name of the plane on the side of the plane. What does he call the plane? So I heard someone say it to the side of me over here. Enola Gay. Enola Gay. Where did he get that? What does that mean? So his mother's name was Enola Gay Tibbets. And he named his plane after his mom. Not exactly the staunch, hard-faced, Air Force pilot, warrior you would imagine naming his plane that's about to bomb Japan with an atomic bomb after his mommy. But interestingly enough, that's what he did. And where does that come from? Obviously, it comes from a recognition of what does a parent mean? What does a father and a mother mean to a person? It means everything. What are the people who take care of us in our lives, who help us out? From the caretakers in our lives, mothers, fathers, relatives, to the friends and people who've done favors for us and help us out along the way. Recognizing, being makir, recognizing the tov that these people do for us and give to us, being able to see beyond ourselves, like Yehuda, being able to admit that we're not totally in control, and recognize when we receive that help and thank for it appropriately. He named the entire plane after his mother. The more healthy a person is within his own ego, let's call it, the more self-confident a person is. He's comfortable in his own skin, comfortable with who he is, comfortable with where he's going. The easier it is to admit, say thank you, and even recognize the milos, the great parts and pieces of other people. You can look at other people and say, oh, that person's really great because of this, and that person's really great because of that. However, bruised egos cannot admit. Someone who has more of a bruised ego, a lack of confidence as to who he is, where he's going, what he needs to do. Remember, confidence in those things doesn't mean that you're a Baal Gaiva at all. It just means you have an understanding of where you're going in life overall. Doesn't mean you know what you're going to do for Parnasa or any of these details. It means you understand. You're on the right derech. You're on the derech of limud Torah and mitzvahs and working on staying away from averos. It doesn't mean you're perfect. It means you have the ultimate goal in front of you. You're confident about what you need to do, and you'll succeed and stumble like the rest of us. But that doesn't take away from the fact that you know what you got to do and you're doing it as best as you can. the more we can become people like that, the more we can be really happy for other people. And that's not going to be a threat to us. We will not look across the Beis Medrash and see, oh wait, how long is he learning? How long is he davening? How stark is he doing on his tests? What kind of chabur is he presenting? Oh, how many friends does he have? What's going on in that room? Why am I not a part of this group? I'm doing what I should be doing. I'm doing what I can be doing. The rest is up to the Ribono Shalom. I put my shtadlus in, of course. But I'm confident, I have that self-confidence, that self-comfort to know I'm at peace with myself. And then you can just simply, genuinely be happy for other people, which is a beautiful midah. Ultimately, probably makes a person more popular in the end. But that's not necessarily the kavana of what a person should be thinking of in doing it. But ultimately, it can be actually a nice byproduct. We find that Yosef cried on Binyamin. Binyamin cried on Yosef. So Chazal tell us that Yosef was crying for the 2 Batei Mikdashos that would be destroyed in Binyamin's territory, and Binyamin was crying for the Mishkan Shiloh that would be destroyed in Yosef's territory. I once heard from Rabbi Goldfez in town. He said a simple question on that Chazal. Yosef's crying for Mishkan Shiloh, and Binyamin's crying for Mishkan Shiloh, and Yosef's crying for the Batei Mikdashos and Binyamin. They have their own things to cry about. Yosef should be crying about Mishkan Shiloh, and Binyamin should be crying about the 2 Batei Mikdashos. They have plenty to cry about for themselves and their own children and descendants and territories and the terrible tragedies that will occur in the future. And yet, when they hugged, now Yosef's crying for Binyamin, and Binyamin's crying for Yosef. See the awesome power that great people have when it comes to feeling another person, empathizing, as opposed to just sympathizing. Really putting yourself in another person's shoes. And while here we're using it, and many times it's used to connote feeling someone else's pain, it applies just as much to feeling someone else's joy. Celebrating genuinely with another person how free that feeling is, and not constantly thinking, what about me? Why him, why not me? And all the jealousy that comes along with that. And I think that really these 2 ideas, gratitude and jealousy, are very related to each other because of what we said. The more a person can say thank you, recognize the goodness that was done to him, and express appropriate gratitude, be makir tov, whenever those things are done for him, the more he builds and builds his self-confidence. The more a person actively goes. Sometimes you can work at it from the other direction. It's a practical tip. I'm literally saying this to you as a practical avoda that you can start right now, tonight. Every day, choose a different person in your brain. Don't tell anyone. Choose another person. It could be someone in your grade, in a different grade, wherever. Choose another person. Preferably even not your best friend, who you might already have lots of connection to and lots of great things to say. Someone. Preferably maybe even someone you don't like so much. And there's less of a reason for you to think something good about that person. And find one good thing about them. Really think about it. Don't just go, oh, okay, yeah, they have this. He has really nice ears. Well, everyone has ears. Find something real. Think about something from within that he might have. And just think about it. Think about it for 10 seconds. But really stop and think. Once a day. Could be part of your Mussar Seder, whatever. Whenever it is. Could be while you're walking. And try to think of a different person each day for 10 seconds. You're going through the process of building that midah and that habit of thinking good about people, recognizing the good in others, and that actually will work backwards to make you slowly but surely into a more self-confident person, because you're just becoming more habituated to that type of thinking. These things work in 2 ways, both directions. That's a practical tip. Don't judge your accomplishments based on how others are doing. Just think about, how am I doing compared to how can I be doing? That's the bar for each and every one of us. How am I doing compared to how can I be doing? Not how am I doing compared to anyone else but me. That's it. And it's really hard at times. The Rebbeinu Shalom sometimes blesses certain people with certain raw talents that just express themselves everywhere. In the Beis Medrash, out of the Beis Medrash, in the classroom, out of the classroom, on the ball field, out of the ball field, all over the place. That's fine. As long as I know I'm doing my best, then I'm getting 100. In fact, that's how the Rebbeinu Shalom judges us. He doesn't judge us against other people. He judges us based on the talents, kochos that he gave us. And he says, do your best. And if you're doing your best, you get 100. Same 100 as anyone else who's doing their best. And by the way, it's a pretty obvious point, but it's worth speaking out. If you try your best and you get, let's just say, for argument's sake, using test scores, an 80 on the Ian test, and someone else puts some effort into it, but he happens to have raw talent and smartness and raw quickness in his mind, and he gets a 90 on his test, when it comes to the real markings of the test, you got 100, and he might have only gotten a 50, or a 60, or a 70, or an 80, whatever amount of effort he put in. It doesn't go based on the amount of knowledge you retain at the end because of a certain natural talent you have. It's all based on effort. Try to focus on that. It's hard at times, but using that other tip that I told you, really trying to think positively about other people, building the self-confidence from within you, will allow you to really embrace this concept, which is such an emistic concept, it's a true concept, to only judge yourself against yourself, not against others. I've heard from Rav Ezra Neuberger that sometimes you can look at two chavrusas arguing with each other in a sugya. A certain svara and a tosfos, whatever, they're arguing at a certain point. And you're listening to the conversation, and it sounds like he's saying this, and then he's saying this back in response, and then he's saying this, and he quickly cuts him off, and he says this, but it seems like he made a good point, and then he cuts him off, but he seems to also make a good point, and the argument's getting heated and going back and forth. Sometimes if you could kind of take out the remote and push mute, or you could just cover your ears, and just watch the argument, without hearing any of the words, you could almost see in the body language that this argument about that point in the Tosas is not really what the argument is about at all. Actually, the argument has much more to do with each person's ego. And is he going to best me this time? Or maybe, depending on history, is he going to best me again? Again? I can't let that happen. I'm defending my ego. He's defending his ego. I'm attacking his ego. He's attacking, and that's really what's going on. So be cognizant, even in learning, but it applies in learning, it applies to everything in life. When you're arguing about something, when you're having a debate and all these things, recognize, where is this coming from? Search for truth. Am I really listening to another person? How many times are we really listening, and how many times are we thinking, what should my response be in order to protect myself, in order to win, in order to succeed, in order to whatever my motivation might be? Let's listen. Honestly, be open to hearing what other people are saying. Repeat what they said to make sure we get it. This applies in everything in life, in every interaction in life with another person. Certainly it applies in learning also, where the topics can get quite subtle. There can be subtle distinctions and subtle complexities to it. If you really work on understanding each other in your chavrusas and your chaburas and your shiurim well, and then you think about it, digest it, and express a point or an attack or a question or whatever, it gets so much farther towards actually discovering emes. But again, it requires this idea. Eradicating as much as possible jealousy, working on jealousy, becoming less jealous, working on your own self-confidence. Can you ever completely get rid of jealousy? Of course not. We're human beings. And we have to recognize that. We can't fake ourselves out, but we can always work on it. We can always become bigger and bigger and bigger people, slowly but surely. And it is now when you're teenagers that you have the greatest chance of working on it. This 10-second a day thing that I'm giving you, obviously if you spend 5 minutes a day, better. I wouldn't spend too much more than that. But even just this 10-second a day thing that I'm suggesting, thinking about one good thing about another person each day, over the course of your teenage years, that could develop this mean to so much, and then, hopefully not you, but most adults kind of cruise. once they get to adulthood and marriage and jobs and parnasa and kids, etc. They're not really working on themselves too much at that point. So it's almost a little ironic, but it is during these less mature teenage years that you're kind of setting yourself up for what path am I on? Am I on a growing path? Am I looking to develop myself? And then it will be more natural to even develop and grow more when you're an adult. And you'll be starting at a higher point. Or not. I'll kind of cruise through these teenage years and I'll grow when I'm an adult and I'm more mature then. Big mistake. It's much more natural to cruise through life and not grow once you're an adult. Now's the time to do it. And I think I gave you a practical tip that is worth considering to do. You could even, at times, it doesn't have to be every day, could be, but you could even at times take that practical tip one step further and actually go over to that person. Compliment him. Now, it might be a little awkward or strange if you just randomly go over to the person you're not even so friendly with, but let's say somebody did accomplish something. Do something to make it real. Solidify it. Let's say somebody looks at his test and he's like, all right, he's got a good mark and he's happy about it. Go over to him, pat him on the back, say, good job, nice mark. Let's say somebody answers a question of the Rebbe, or let's say your Chavrusa makes a good point in the say. That's a really good point. Shkoyach, excellent, that's really good. Thank you for that. Yeah, I think you're right. Go through the motions of saying it, even if you're thinking it. Actually expressing it, it does even more in this idea, in this direction of working on this midah, of self-confidence, of working to become bigger and bigger people, to not allow our egos to get into the way of truth, and of being able to express gratitude like Yehuda did, and of being able to recognize what is really at play, the Ribono Shalom, and we just have to do our best, and He takes care of the rest. And that is really a basis for all of life. In Mirz Hashem, if we're able to do this and work on this, the Ribono Shalom, Midah Keneged Midah, will look at us, and He will say, you go out of your way to find the good in other people, to even at times go out of your way to compliment a person on a job well done, I'm going to go out of my way to find the good in you. And even though we all stumble and we all have bad things that the Ribono Shalom could, chas v'shalom, look at, so to speak, this is a wonderful, wonderful schus to have for the Ribono Shalom to focus on the good that we all have, the much good that we all have as well. And in Mirz Hashem, we should all work on it, and the Ribono Shalom should become so proud of us that He'll bring us to Yerushalayim Habnuya with Mashiach Tzidkenu B'mheir V'yameinu. Amen. Have a great Shabbos.